I need a husband.
I need a husband by tomorrow, I said louder than I should have, hoping for a miracle. And it actually happened, just not in the way I wanted. A dangerous mobster showed up saying he would save me, but not in the way I expected.
Welcome to my library. I'm Lena, and our story is just beginning.
Chapter 1. The Impossible Request. The coffee maker at Romano's diner broke at exactly 9:47 p.m., which felt appropriate since my entire life had been breaking in small catastrophic ways for the past 6 months. And at this point, a malfunctioning espresso machine was honestly the least of my problems. "Thea, table 6 needs a refill," Marco called from the kitchen, and I grabbed the regular coffee pot because explaining that our fancy machine was dead would take energy I absolutely did not have. It was Tuesday, which meant slow night, which meant I'd maybe make $60 in tips if I was lucky, which was $30 short of what I needed for Luna's school trip deposit that was due Friday. But I'd figure it out the way I always figured everything out, by working another double shift and surviving on 4 hours of sleep, and the kind of stubborn determination that was either admirable or concerning depending on who you asked. "Here you go," I said, refilling the cup for the businessman at table 6 who didn't look up from his laptop, and I moved through the rest of my tables on autopilot, smiling and nodding and pretending that being a single mother working 60-hour weeks while fighting for custody of my daughter was totally manageable and not slowly destroying me from the inside out. My phone buzzed in my apron pocket around 10:15, and I almost ignored it because phones buzzing during shifts were usually either spam calls or my mother asking if I was eating enough. But something made me check, and I felt my stomach drop when I saw my lawyer's name. I ducked into the back hallway near the bathrooms where Marco couldn't see me slacking off, and answered with hands that were already shaking. "And Caroline, hi, what's wrong?" "Thea," my lawyer said, and her tone told me everything I needed to know before she even continued. "We have a problem." Of course we did. Because problems were apparently my brand now. "Margaret filed an emergency motion," Caroline continued, and I closed my eyes because Margaret was my ex-mother-in-law, the woman who'd been trying to take Luna from me since my husband died, the person who somehow had unlimited money for lawyers while I was rationing coffee grounds. "She's claiming that your work schedule constitutes neglect, that Luna needs a more stable home environment. I work to provide for my daughter," I said, my voice coming out sharper than intended. "That's not neglect. That's called being a parent." "I know," Caroline said gently, but the judge granted an emergency hearing, tomorrow at 2 p.m. The world tilted sideways, and I pressed my hand against the wall to steady myself. "Tomorrow? How is that legal?" "She has connections," Caroline said, which was lawyer speak for money buys faster court dates. "And Thea, there's more. She's specifically citing your single status as a concern. She's arguing that Luna needs a 2-parent household, that you can't provide the stability she needs alone." I laughed, the sound coming out slightly hysterical, because of course my dead husband's mother was using the fact that he died against me, like I'd chosen to be widowed at 26 with a 4-year-old daughter and medical bills that would take me a decade to pay off. "So what do I do?" I asked, and I hated how small my voice sounded. "Show up tomorrow and prove her wrong," Caroline said. "Dress professionally, bring documentation of Luna's school records and medical appointments. Show the judge you're an involved parent despite the work schedule. We'll argue that a working mother shouldn't be penalized for providing for her child." "Will that be enough?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "I don't know," Caroline admitted. "Margaret has a lot of resources and a very expensive legal team, but we'll fight. Okay, we'll fight hard." We hung up with plans to meet at the courthouse at 1:30, and I stood there in the dim hallway with my phone clutched in my shaking hand and tried very hard not to completely fall apart. Tomorrow at 2 p.m., my ex-mother-in-law was going to try to take my daughter away from me, and the best defense I had was, "Look, I'm doing my best," which apparently wasn't good enough for the legal system. I needed something more. I needed something impossible. I walked back into the diner in a daze, and Marco took one look at my face and asked if I was okay, and I opened my mouth to say something reassuring, and instead, what came out was, "I need a husband by tomorrow." The words hung in the air, too loud in the quiet diner, and I watched several of my regulars look up with varying degrees of confusion and amusement. Old Mrs. Patterson at table 3 actually laughed. "Don't we all, honey? I'm serious," I said, and I was, sort of, in the hysterical way that happens when your life is actively imploding. "I have a custody hearing tomorrow, and apparently being a single working mother makes me unfit. So what I need is a husband. By tomorrow, at 2 p.m. "That's not how marriage works," Marco said, but he was smiling like this was a joke. "I know that's not how marriage works," I said, my voice going higher. But I also know that Margaret Richardson has 3 lawyers and a judge who apparently think single mothers are suspicious, and I have $60 in tips and 4 hours of sleep and a coffee maker that just died. So yes, Marco, I'm aware that's not how marriage works, but I'm fresh out of better ideas. I was spiraling. I knew I was spiraling, could feel the panic rising in my chest like water filling a sinking ship, and I should have stopped talking, but the words kept coming. I need someone to sit in that courtroom and make me look stable. I continued to absolutely no one and everyone. But someone who can pretend for 2 hours that I'm not alone, that Luna has a family, that we're this perfect unit that Margaret can't tear apart because we're already complete. I'll do it. The voice came from the corner booth, deep and careful, and I turned to find a man I hadn't even noticed was there. And when our eyes met, I felt something electric and familiar shock through me, even though I couldn't place why. He was maybe 30, dressed in dark jeans and a jacket that looked expensive in the deliberately understated way that actually expensive things did, and there was something about his face, sharp cheekbones and dark eyes and a mouth that looked like it smiled rarely, that made my breath catch for reasons I didn't have time to examine. "I'm sorry. What?" I managed. "I'll do it," he repeated, standing up and moving toward me with the kind of confidence that suggested he'd thought this through while I'd been having a public breakdown. "I'll be your husband for the hearing." "That's insane," I said, even as something in me wanted to say yes immediately. "I don't even know you." "You know me," he said, and something in his tone made me look at him more closely, really look, and suddenly I saw past the years and the expensive clothes and the way he carried himself now. "Reese," I whispered, and watched him nod once. "Reese Donovan, who'd lived 3 streets over from my childhood home, who'd gone to the same high school for 2 years before disappearing, who I'd had exactly 7 real conversations with, and approximately 1,000 imagined ones, because he'd been beautiful and dangerous and completely off limits. "You remember?" he said, and there was something vulnerable in the way he said it. It's been 12 years, I said, my brain struggling to process this on top of everything else happening. "What are you even doing here?" "Eating pie," Reese said, gesturing to the half-finished slice on his table. "But now I'm apparently volunteering to be your temporary husband." "You can't be serious," I said. "I'm very serious," he replied, and his eyes held mine with an intensity that made my pulse spike. You need someone to sit in that courtroom tomorrow and make you look stable. I can do that. I'm good at looking stable." "Why?" I asked, because this made no sense. Because people didn't just volunteer to fake marry strangers, even if those strangers were technically childhood acquaintances. "Why would you help me?" Something complicated flickered across his expression, there and gone too quickly to identify. "Because you asked. And because I can." "That's not a reason," I said. "It's the only reason you're getting right now," Reese said. "Do you want my help or not?" I should have said no, should have thanked him for the insane offer and gone back to my tables and figured something else out. But I was desperate and terrified, and he was standing there looking at me like this was actually possible. "What would it involve?" I asked, and I watched his shoulders relax slightly like he'd been worried I'd refuse outright. "We get married at City Hall tomorrow morning," Reese said, pulling out his phone. 9 a.m. I'll handle the paperwork. Then we show up to your hearing at 2 as a legally married couple. I sit there and look supportive, and after the judge rules in your favor, we can annul it quietly." "You really think it's that simple?" I asked. "No," he admitted, "but it's simpler than losing your daughter." The words hit hard because he was right, because I would do anything to keep Luna, including marry a man I barely knew who'd materialized out of my past like some kind of convenient plot device. "I can't pay you," I said, needing him to understand. "I have about $200 in savings, and that needs to last until my next paycheck." "I'm not asking for money," Reese said. "Then what are you asking for?" He was quiet for a moment, and I saw something that looked almost like pain cross his face before he controlled it. "Nothing you can't give. Just show up tomorrow, marry me, and let me help you keep your kid." It was insane. It was impossible. It was also the only option I had. "Okay," I said, and watched surprise flicker in his eyes like he hadn't actually expected me to agree. "Okay, yes, I'll marry you tomorrow if you're genuinely offering." "I'm offering," Reese said, and pulled out a business card. "That's my number. Text me your address and I'll pick you up at 8:30. Wear something that looks like you're not actively falling apart." "Wow, romantic," I said, but I took the card. "This isn't romance," Reese said, his voice dropping lower. "This is necessity. Don't confuse the two." He left money on his table, way too much money, I noticed, and walked out of the diner, leaving me standing there with a business card in my shaking hand, and the growing realization that I'd just agreed to marry someone I barely remembered. Marco appeared beside me. "Did that just happen?" "I think so," I said, staring at the door Reese had disappeared through. "You're going to marry him?" Marco asked. "Tomorrow?" "Apparently," I said, and started laughing because the alternative was crying. "I need a husband by tomorrow and the universe sent me a ghost from high school." "Sure, why not? This might as well happen." "Thea," Marco started, concerned. "It's fine," I interrupted, tucking the card into my apron. It's totally fine. This is a perfectly normal solution to a custody hearing. People do this all the time. They absolutely do not do this all the time, Marco said. Well then I'm a trendsetter, I replied, and went back to refilling coffee cups because I still had an hour left on my shift, and a life that apparently now included a spontaneous wedding. I texted my mother around 11 to let her know I was picking Luna up early from her place tomorrow because I had something important to handle, which was the understatement of the century, and she responded immediately. Mom, is everything okay with the hearing? Me, I'm handling it. I'll explain later. Just need Luna home tomorrow night. Mom, okay, sweetie. You know I'm here if you need anything. I did know that, but what I needed was something my mother couldn't provide, something nobody could provide except apparently Reese Donovan, who I hadn't seen in 12 years, and who'd just offered to marry me in a diner at 10 p.m. on a Tuesday. When my shift finally ended at midnight, I walked to my car on shaking legs and sat in the driver's seat for a long moment, just breathing, trying to process what I'd agreed to. Tomorrow, I was getting married, to Reese Donovan, to save my daughter. And the strangest part wasn't even the marriage. It was the way he'd looked at me when he'd said, "You know me," like those words meant something more than they should, like we had a history deeper than 7 conversations and mutual awareness of each other's existence. But I didn't have time to analyze his motivations or second-guess this decision, so I drove home to my tiny apartment and tried to find something in my closet that looked like stable married woman instead of exhausted single mother on the edge of breakdown. And when I finally fell into bed at 2 a.m., my last thought before sleep claimed me was, I'm getting married tomorrow, and I have absolutely no idea if this is going to save me or destroy me. Chapter 2. What we were and weren't. I woke up at 6 a.m. to my alarm and the immediate visceral memory that I was getting married in 3.5 hours, and for about 30 seconds I lay there convinced it had been a stress-induced hallucination brought on by too much coffee and impending legal doom. Then I saw Reese's business card on my nightstand, simple black text on cream paper that just said Reese Donovan, and a phone number, and reality crashed back in. This was actually happening. I was actually marrying someone I barely knew to keep my daughter. Okay, I said out loud to my empty bedroom, because talking to myself had become a coping mechanism somewhere around month 3 of single motherhood. Okay, this is fine. This is a totally normal thing that normal people do when faced with horrible ex-mothers-in-law and corrupt custody systems. My phone buzzed with a text. Unknown number. It's Reese. Still at the same address. The apartment on Morrison. I stared at the message, my brain trying to process how he knew where I lived, before remembering that Morrison Street was where my parents' house had been, where I'd grown up 3 streets over from him. Me. Different apartment. I'll text you the address. How did you know about Morrison? Reese. I remember. 2 words that shouldn't have made my stomach flip, but absolutely did. Because what did he remember exactly? That I'd lived on Morrison? That we'd gone to the same school? That we'd had 7 real conversations and I'd thought about him for years after he disappeared? I pushed the thoughts away and texted him my actual address, then dragged myself out of bed to figure out what one wore to a spontaneous City Hall wedding that was actually a calculated legal maneuver. The closet options were depressing. Work uniforms, casual clothes that had seen better days, and exactly one dress that I'd bought for David's funeral and hadn't been able to look at since. I pulled it out anyway, because it was simple and navy blue and the kind of thing that said responsible adult instead of woman having extended nervous breakdown, and tried not to think about the last time I'd worn it. My phone rang at 7 while I was attempting to do something with my hair that didn't scream, slept 4 hours and cried twice. Thea, honey, what's going on? My mother's voice came through worried and sharp. You texted me at midnight saying you're handling things but won't tell me how. I'm getting married, I said, because there was no point lying. This morning, at City Hall. Silence. Mom, I'm sorry, she said finally. I thought you just said you're getting married this morning. I did say that, I confirmed, giving up on my hair and pulling it into a bun. To Reese Donovan. Remember him? Lived on Parkwood? Went to Lincoln High for a while? The Donovan boy. My mother's tone shifted into something complicated. Thea, those people were. I know what his family was involved in, I interrupted gently. But it's just for the custody hearing. He's helping me look stable for the judge. By marrying you? It was his idea, I said, which sounded insane even to my own ears. And you just agreed to marry someone you haven't seen in over a decade. I'm desperate, Mom, I said, and my voice cracked slightly. Margaret is trying to take Luna. This might be the only thing that stops her. My mother was quiet for a long moment, and when she spoke again, her voice was softer. Okay. If this is what you need to do, I support you. But Thea, be careful. The Donovan family isn't Reese, I finished. Whatever his family was, he's not them. You don't know that, my mother said. You don't know anything about who he is now. She was right, but I didn't have the luxury of caution, so I just promised to call her after the hearing and hung up before she could talk me out of this. By 8:15, I was dressed and anxious, and rereading the same paragraph in Luna's custody paperwork for the 5th time when my phone buzzed. Reese, outside. I grabbed my purse and the folder Caroline had given me with all my documentation, took one last look at myself in the mirror, exhausted but presentable, which was honestly the best I could manage, and went downstairs to find a black car waiting with Reese leaning against it. He looked different in daylight. Or maybe I just hadn't really looked at him last night through the panic fog, but standing there in dark slacks and a white shirt with his sleeves rolled up, he was objectively, undeniably attractive in a way that made me briefly forget why I was getting into his car. "Morning," he said, opening the passenger door. "You look nice." "I look like I slept 4 hours," I corrected, but slid into the leather seat anyway. "That too," Reese agreed, moving around to the driver's side. "But nice also." We drove in silence for a few blocks, and I watched the familiar streets pass while trying not to think about how surreal this entire situation was. And then Reese spoke. "You really don't remember me, do you?" I turned to look at him, surprised by the question. "I remembered you last night. Reese Donovan, lived on Parkwood. Was at Lincoln for sophomore and junior year before you disappeared." "I didn't disappear," he said, his hands tightening slightly on the steering wheel. "I left. What's the difference?" "Disappearing implies you don't have control," Reese said. "I chose to leave." "Why?" I asked, because that had always been the question, the mystery that had lingered even after I'd moved on with my life. He was quiet for long enough that I thought he wouldn't answer, but then, because staying was dangerous, for me and for anyone near me. The words settled between us with weight I didn't quite understand, and I was about to ask what he meant when he pulled into the City Hall parking lot. "We're here," he said unnecessarily. "Ready to get married?" "Not even remotely," I admitted. But let's do it anyway." 12 years ago, I was 16, and trying to make my locker close properly when I felt someone watching me, and when I turned around, Reese Donovan was standing 3 lockers down, not even pretending he wasn't staring. "Can I help you?" I asked, more curious than annoyed. "Your lock sticks," he said, moving closer. "Hit it right here," he demonstrated, striking the top corner of my locker door, and it clicked shut. "Perfectly." "Thanks," I said, very aware of how close he was standing, how he smelled like cigarettes and something darker I couldn't identify. "You're in my history class." "I know," Reese said, and something about the way he said it made my stomach flip. "Are you going to keep staring at me, or are you actually going to say something?" I asked, surprising myself with the boldness. His lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. "I haven't decided yet." "Well, let me know when you do," I said, and walked away with my heart hammering because Reese Donovan had been watching me, and I had absolutely no idea what to do with that information. He showed up at my locker the next day, and the day after that, and we fell into a pattern of conversations that were too short and too charged, dancing around something neither of us was brave enough to name. "You're too smart for this school," he said once, watching me struggle through calculus homework. "You don't even know if I'm actually smart," I replied. "Maybe I'm just good at faking it." "You are smart," Reese said with certainty, "and you're going to get out of here, go to college somewhere better, become something important." "What are you going to become?" I asked. He looked at me with those dark eyes that seemed older than 17, and said, "Nothing good." I should have asked what he meant, should have pushed, but I was 16 and didn't understand yet what "nothing good" actually translated to in his world. 2 weeks before he disappeared, we had our longest conversation, sitting on the wall behind the school while everyone else was at the football game. "Why don't you ever go to games?" Reese asked. "Because I'd rather be here," I said. "Why don't you?" "Same reason," he replied, and our eyes met with that electric awareness that had been building between us for months. "Thea," he said, my name sounding different in his voice, and I thought he might kiss me, thought this might be the moment everything changed, but instead he said, "You should stay away from me." "Why?" I asked, my heart sinking. "Because I'm not going to be here much longer," Reese said, "and I don't want you caught up in what I'm leaving behind." "What are you leaving behind?" I asked. "Things you're better off not knowing about," he said, and then he was gone, walking away before I could respond. I didn't see him again after that. He just stopped coming to school, stopped showing up anywhere, and by the time I finally worked up the courage to ask someone what happened, his family had moved away and nobody knew where. Present-day City Hall was surprisingly busy for 9 a.m. on a Wednesday, and Reese navigated us through the bureaucracy with the kind of efficiency that suggested he'd done research, filled out forms, brought all necessary documentation without me having to ask. "How did you know my social security number?" I asked, looking at the marriage license application he'd already half completed. "I didn't," Reese said. "I left that section blank for you to fill in, but he'd known everything else. My full legal name, my date of birth, my parents' names, and I wondered what else he remembered from a past that felt simultaneously distant and immediate. The ceremony itself was almost comically brief, a bored clerk reading standard vows in a monotone while we stood there in an office that smelled like coffee and bureaucracy. And when she asked if we had rings, I started to say no, but Reese pulled out a simple silver band. "Where did you get that?" I whispered. "Bought it this morning," he said, sliding it onto my finger with hands that were steadier than mine. Some figured it would look more legitimate. The fit was perfect, and I didn't want to examine how he'd known my ring size or why that attention to detail made something warm curl in my chest. "I now pronounce you married," the clerk said with zero enthusiasm. "Sign here." I signed my name with shaking hands, Thea Morrison becoming Thea Donovan with a pen stroke, and watched Reese sign beside me with his usual careful precision. "Congratulations," the clerk said, already moving on to the next couple. Next, and just like that, we were married. "That was less romantic than I imagined," I said when we got back to the car. "Did you imagine your wedding?" Reese asked, something careful in his tone. "When I was younger," I admitted, before reality got in the way. "What did you imagine?" "Not this," I said, but not unkindly. Though honestly, my first wedding wasn't much better. David and I got married at a courthouse too. His mother refused to come. "Margaret sounds delightful," Reese said dryly. "She's a nightmare," I confirmed. "She never thought I was good enough for David. Too poor, wrong family, not educated enough, and when he died she blamed me for that too somehow." "How did he die?" Reese asked quietly. "Cardiac arrest," I said, the words still hard after 2 years. "Sudden. No warning. He was 28 and just collapsed at work one day. By the time they got him to the hospital, there was too much damage." "I'm sorry," Reese said, and something in his voice made me look at him. "Did you know him?" I asked. "David Morrison? He grew up in the neighborhood too." "I knew of him," Reese said carefully. "He was a few years older. Seemed like a good guy." "He was," I said, my throat tight. "He was a good guy who deserved better than dying young and leaving behind a widow and a daughter." We were quiet for a moment, and then Reese checked his watch. "We have 3 hours before the hearing. Want to get coffee? Actually talk about what we're saying if the judge asks questions." "That's probably smart," I agreed, even though what I really wanted was to ask him all the questions that had been building since last night. Why he'd really volunteered, what he'd been doing for 12 years, if he remembered those conversations as vividly as I did. But we had a hearing to win first, and my curiosity could wait. At least that's what I told myself as we drove to a coffee shop and started building a story of us that was part truth, part fiction, and part something I couldn't quite name. Something that felt dangerous in an entirely different way than Margaret's lawyers. Something that made me wonder if marrying Reese Donovan was going to save me or complicate everything beyond repair.
Flashback showing he was discreetly obsessed with her at 16. Decided to push her away for her own good classic, and then shows up 12 years later with a ring that fits perfectly because he researched her ring size. Nothing strange here. Just a normal man who spent 10 years successfully repressing everything until deciding that this was, objectively, the ideal moment to lose his mind. Totally healthy. And let's be honest, this is exactly what you like, right, Miss Mem?
Chapter 3. The Story. We tell the coffee shop Reese chose was quiet and tucked away on a side street I'd never noticed, the kind of place that probably cost twice what I could afford, but he ordered for both of us without asking about price, and I was too tired to argue about financial boundaries with my brand new husband. "Okay," I said once we were settled in a corner booth with overpriced lattes between us. "We should probably get our story straight before a judge interrogates us about our relationship." "Smart," Reese agreed, pulling out his phone. "I made notes this morning. Basic timeline, how we met, why we decided to marry now." "You made notes," I repeated, "for our fake marriage backstory." "It's not fake," he corrected. "We're legally married. The backstory is just simplified." "Simplified how?" "We tell the truth where we can," Reese said, his eyes meeting mine. "We went to high school together, lost touch after I left. Reconnected recently, and realized we'd both been thinking about each other for years." The last part made my stomach flip stupidly. "Had you been thinking about me?" "Yes," he said simply, no elaboration, and I didn't know what to do with that honesty. "Okay," I managed. "So we reconnected. How?" "I saw you at the diner," Reese said. "Recognized you immediately. Came back a few times. Worked up the courage to talk to you. We started dating." "When did this supposed dating start?" I asked. 2 months ago," he said. "Long enough to be serious, but not so long that people question why they haven't heard about it." "And why didn't I tell anyone?" I challenged. "Because that was exactly what Margaret's lawyers would ask." "Because you're private," Reese said. "Because you wanted to make sure it was real before involving Luna. Because after everything with David you were cautious about introducing someone new into your daughter's life." I stared at him. impressed despite myself. "You're good at this. I've had practice lying to people," he said, and there was something bitter in his tone. "Though this isn't entirely a lie." "What part is true?" I asked. His eyes held mine with an intensity that made my breath catch. "I did recognize you immediately. I did come back to the diner multiple times, and I have been thinking about you for years." "Why?" The question came out softer than intended. "Because you were the one good thing in my life back then," Reese said, "and then I walked away from you without explanation. Because I was a coward who thought leaving was noble instead of cruel." The confession hung between us, raw and unexpected, and I felt something shift in how I was seeing him, seeing this entire situation. "You weren't cruel," I said quietly. "You were 17 and dealing with things I didn't understand." "You still don't understand," Reese said, looking away. "And that's probably better." "Is it?" I challenged. "Because right now I'm married to someone who I barely know, trusting him with my daughter's future, and I have no idea what I'm actually getting into." "You're getting a husband who will sit in that courtroom and convince a judge you're stable," Reese said. "That's all you need to know." "That's not all I want to know," I countered. "What have you been doing for 12 years? Where did you go? What kind of work do you do that lets you drop everything to marry a stranger on a Wednesday morning?" Reese was quiet for a long moment, his fingers tracing patterns on his coffee cup, and when he spoke, his voice was carefully measured. "I work in business consulting. I have flexible hours, and you're not a stranger, Thea. You never were." "Business consulting," I repeated skeptically, because something about the way he said it felt like another simplification. "Yes, that's vague." "It's accurate," he said, meeting my eyes again. "I help businesses restructure, renegotiate contracts, handle complicated transitions. It pays well, and I'm good at it." "And that's why you can just take a day off to play husband?" I asked. "I'm the boss," Reese said with a slight smile. "I make my own schedule." I wanted to push more, to ask harder questions, but my phone buzzed with a text from Caroline, asking me to confirm I'd be there early, and reality crashed back in. "We should go over possible questions," I said, pulling out the folder. "Margaret's lawyers are going to try to make me look unstable, irresponsible, incapable of providing proper care." "How do they plan to do that?" Reese asked, his tone shifting to something more focused. "They'll bring up my work schedule," I said, scanning Caroline's notes. "The fact that Luna stays with my mother 3 nights a week. They'll probably mention the apartment, try to make it sound unsafe or inadequate. They might bring up David's death, suggest I'm not emotionally stable enough." "That's bullshit," Reese said flatly. "It's legal strategy," I corrected. "They're not trying to be fair. They're trying to win." "Then we make sure they don't," Reese said, and there was steel in his voice now. "Walk me through what they might ask me." We spent the next hour rehearsing answers, building our story into something believable and consistent, and I watched Reese absorb information and adapt with frightening efficiency, like he'd done this before in different contexts. "How involved are you with Luna?" he asked at one point. "I will say moderately involved," I said. "You've met her several times, spent time with both of us, but we've been taking it slow. You're not trying to replace her father, just supporting both of us." "Have I actually met her?" Reese asked. "No," I admitted. "I wasn't lying when I said I'm cautious about introducing people. Luna doesn't know you exist." Something complicated crossed his expression. "What will you tell her after the hearing?" "The truth," I said. "And that you're helping us, that it's temporary, that she shouldn't get attached." "You think she'd get attached?" he asked quietly. "She's 4, I said. "She gets attached to everyone. She asked the mailman if he wanted to stay for dinner last week." Reese's lips curved into an almost smile. "She sounds like you. She's braver than me," I said, less scared of people leaving. "People leave her often?" he asked, and I heard something protective in his tone. "And David left," I said, even though that wasn't fair. "Not by choice, but she doesn't understand that. And Margaret has been threatening to take her for months. So yes, Luna's world feels unstable right now. We'll fix that today," Reese said with certainty. "You sound confident." "I am confident," he replied. "Margaret Richardson might have money and lawyers, but she doesn't have the actual moral high ground. You're a good mother fighting to keep your child. That matters." "It should matter," I corrected. "But the system doesn't always work that way." "Then we make it work," Reese said, and the conviction in his voice made me almost believe him. We arrived at the courthouse at 1:15, and Caroline met us at the entrance with relief written all over her face. "Thank God you're here," she said, then did a double take when she saw Reese. "And you brought someone." "Caroline, this is Reese Donovan," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "My husband." Caroline's eyes went wide. "You're what?" "We got married this morning," I said, showing her the ring. "City Hall. Very simple. This is what you meant about showing stability, right? I meant demonstrate involvement in Luna's life, not spontaneously marry someone, Caroline said, but I could see her lawyer brain already working, though this does change things. Margaret's entire argument is based on your single status. That's the idea, Reese said, offering his hand. Reese Donovan, I'm here to support Thea and help prove Luna has a stable home. Caroline shook his hand slowly, studying him with the kind of assessment that made me nervous. How long have you two been together? 2 months officially, Reese said smoothly, but we've known each other since high school. Recently reconnected and realized what we'd both been missing. And you married her this morning, Caroline repeated, the same day as her custody hearing. I married her this morning because I love her, Reese said, his hand finding mine with perfect timing, and because I wanted to make sure the court understood that Luna has a family, that Thea isn't alone in this. The lie came out so naturally I almost believed it myself, and I watched Caroline's skepticism start to crack. Okay, she said finally. Okay, this is insane, and possibly the worst timing ever, but it might actually work. Margaret's lawyers will argue it's suspicious, but at least now we can counter their stability claims. What do we need to do? I asked. Present a united front, Caroline said. Reese, you'll sit behind Thea in the courtroom. Look supportive but not overbearing. If they question you, and they might, stick to simple truths. How you met, why you married now, what your intentions are regarding Luna. Understood, Reese said. And Thea, Caroline continued, her eyes finding mine. This might get ugly. Margaret's team will try to make you look impulsive and unstable because of this marriage. Stay calm, answer honestly, and remember that the judge is looking for what's best for Luna, not what looks best on paper. We went through security and made our way to the family court section, and with every step, I felt the weight of what I was about to face, what I was risking, what could go wrong. Hey, Reese said quietly, his hand warm on my lower back. Breathe. You've got this. You don't know that, I said. I know you, he replied. And you're strong enough to handle whatever they throw at you. You don't actually know me, I protested. Not anymore. It's been 12 years. Some things don't change, Reese said, and there was something in his voice that made me look at him, really look at him, and see something that looked almost like guilt beneath the confidence. What aren't you telling me? I asked. A lot of things, he admitted, but none of them matter right now. What matters is keeping Luna with you. Before I could push further, Caroline called us into the courtroom, and suddenly we were sitting at a table with Margaret and her 3 lawyers across from us, and I felt Reese take his seat directly behind me, close enough that I could feel his presence like a physical anchor. The judge entered. Everyone stood, and as I sat back down with my hands shaking and my future hanging in the balance, I felt Reese lean forward slightly. Whatever happens, he whispered, you're not alone in this. And despite everything, the lies, the confusion, the fact that I'd married him this morning in an act of pure desperation, I found myself believing him, at least for now. At least for the next 2 hours, that would determine everything. Chapter 4. The hearing judge Patricia Morrison, no relation, I'd checked, was a woman in her 60s with steel gray hair and the kind of face that suggested she'd heard every lie and manipulation tactic the legal system could offer, and I felt her assessing gaze sweep over me with professional detachment when she called the case. Morrison versus Richardson, custody modification hearing, she said, glancing at her notes. Mrs. Richardson, you filed an emergency motion claiming the child Luna Morrison is currently in an unsuitable living situation. Please present your argument. Margaret's lead lawyer stood, a man named James Blackwood, who looked like he charged $1,000 an hour, and I watched him arrange his papers with deliberate precision before speaking. Your Honor, we're here today because we're concerned about the welfare of 4-year-old Luna Morrison, he began, his voice carrying that practiced sympathy that made my skin crawl. While we acknowledge that Ms. Morrison loves her daughter, love alone doesn't constitute proper care. I felt Reese shift behind me, his presence solid and grounding. The facts are straightforward, Blackwood continued. Ms. Morrison works 60-plus hours weekly between 2 jobs, leaving Luna in various care situations. The child spends 3 nights per week with her grandmother, attends daycare during work hours, and is frequently shuffled between locations. This lack of stability is concerning. Ms. Morrison works to provide for her child, Caroline countered immediately. Man, that's not neglect. That's responsible parenting. Perhaps, Blackwood said smoothly, but there are also concerns about Miss Morrison's emotional state. Her husband died tragically 2 years ago, and she's had little time to process that grief while working multiple jobs. We question whether she's capable of providing the emotional support Luna needs. That's offensive and baseless, Caroline said, her voice hardening. Is it? Blackwood pulled out a document. Ms. Morrison has missed 2 therapy appointments that were court-ordered after her husband's death. She's defaulted on medical bills. Her apartment is in a building with 3 code violations currently under review. I felt my face heat because those things were true, even if the way he framed them was designed to make me look neglectful instead of struggling. Additionally, Blackwood continued, Ms. Morrison has demonstrated impulsive decision-making that calls her judgment into question. Such as, Judge Morrison asked, such as getting married this morning, Blackwood said, and I felt the courtroom shift. To a man, we can find no record of her having any relationship with prior to today. A man whose family has documented connections to organized crime in this city. My stomach dropped, and I felt Reese go very still behind me. Your Honor, Caroline said quickly, Mrs. Morrison's marriage is not relevant to this hearing. It's highly relevant, Blackwood interrupted. My client is concerned that Ms. Morrison married a stranger with a questionable background in a desperate attempt to appear stable for this hearing. That's not stability, that's deception. Mr. Donovan is not a stranger to my client, Caroline argued. They attended high school together and recently reconnected. How recently? Judge Morrison asked, her eyes finding mine. I swallowed hard. 2 months ago, Your Honor. And you married him this morning, the judge said. The same day as this hearing. Yes, I admitted, because lying would only make things worse. That does seem convenient, Miss Ira Morrison. It's not about convenience, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. It's about commitment. Reese and I reconnected and realized we wanted to build a life together. The timing might seem sudden, but when you know something's right, waiting feels pointless. How romantic, Blackwood said dryly. Your Honor, may we question Mr. Donovan about this sudden marriage? Judge Morrison looked at Reese, who was sitting perfectly still with his hands clasped and his expression neutral. Mr. Donovan, please take the stand. I watched Reese move to the witness box with that same predatory grace from last night, and when he was sworn in and seated, Blackwood approached with the look of a shark smelling blood. Mr. Donovan, you married Ms. Morrison this morning, correct? Yes, Reese said calmly. After dating for 2 months. Yes. And before today, when was the last time you'd seen Ms. Morrison prior to these 2 months? Reese didn't hesitate. On 12 years ago, we went to high school together. 12 years, Blackwood repeated. That's quite a gap. What prompted you to suddenly reconnect? I saw her at her workplace, Reese said. Recognized her immediately. Started coming back to see if she'd remember me. And she did remember you. Eventually, Reese said, his eyes briefly meeting mine. How convenient that this rekindled romance happened to coincide with Ms. Morrison's custody issues, Blackwood said. I wasn't aware of her custody issues when we started dating, Reese replied evenly. She didn't tell me about them until recently because she's private about her struggles, or because the relationship is fabricated, Blackwood suggested. Objection, Caroline said. Speculation. Sustained, Judge Morrison said. Mr. Blackwood, do you have actual questions? Yes, Your Honor, Blackwood said, turning back to Reese. Mr. Donovan, what do you do for a living? I'm a business consultant, Reese said. That's vague. Can you be more specific? I help businesses restructure debt, renegotiate contracts, handle complicated transitions. And your family? Blackwood pressed. Well, the Donovan family has quite a reputation in this city, doesn't it? I watched Reese's jaw tighten slightly. I'm not responsible for my family's reputation, but you are connected to them, Blackwood said. Your father, Vincent Donovan, was investigated by the FBI for racketeering. Your uncle served time for fraud. Your family business was shut down by federal authorities when you were 18. All true, Reese said calmly. None of which has anything to do with me or my relationship with Thea. Doesn't it? Blackwood challenged. You grew up in a family involved in criminal enterprise. How can we trust that you're a suitable influence on a young child? Because I'm not my family, Reese said, and there was steel in his voice now. I left that world when I was 17 specifically because I didn't want any part of it. I built my own career, my own life, completely separate from them. Yet you married a woman you barely know the same day she's fighting for custody, Blackwood said. That seems like the kind of calculated move someone trained in manipulation might make. It's the kind of move someone makes when they love someone and want to support them, Reese corrected. I married Thea because I want to be part of her life and Luna's life. Not to manipulate a court system, but because I care about them. The way he said it, with such quiet conviction, made something in my chest tighten painfully. You've met Luna? Blackwood asked. Not yet, Reese admitted. Thea wanted to be sure about us before involving her daughter. That's responsible parenting, not neglect. Or convenient timing, Blackwood said. But I could see he wasn't landing the hits he wanted. No further questions, he said finally, and Reese returned to his seat behind me. Your Honor, Caroline said, standing. I'd like to call Ms. Morrison to speak about her parenting and her relationship. I took the stand with shaking hands, got sworn in, and tried to remember every piece of advice Caroline had given me about staying calm and honest. Ms. Morrison, Caroline began gently. Can you tell us about your typical week with Luna? I took a breath. I work Tuesday through Saturday at Romano's Diner, usually 6 a.m. to 2 p.m. Luna stays with my mother those mornings, and I pick her up after my shift. We have lunch together. I help with any preschool activities. We play, read books, normal afternoon things. 3 nights a week my mother keeps her overnight so I can work an evening shift. But the other nights Luna is with me. And on your days off, Sundays and Mondays are just us, I said, and my voice warmed thinking about it. We go to the park, the library, sometimes the children's museum if I can afford admission. We cook together. She helps me with laundry. We watch movies. She's my entire world. Your Honor, Blackwood interrupted. This is very touching, but it doesn't address the fundamental concern about stability. Let her finish, Judge Morrison said sharply. Thank you, Your Honor, Caroline said. Ms. Morrison, Mr. Blackwood mentioned missed therapy appointments and medical bills. Can you explain those circumstances? The therapy appointments were scheduled during my work hours, I said. I asked to reschedule, but the office couldn't accommodate evening slots, and I couldn't afford to miss work. I tried to explain that to the court coordinator, but the request got denied. And the medical bills. From my husband's death, I said, my throat tight. David had a cardiac arrest at work. The ambulance, the hospital, all of it happened so fast. Insurance covered some, but not all, and I've been making payments when I can. I'm not defaulting. I'm just paying slowly because I have to prioritize rent and food. The code violations in your building, Caroline prompted. A broken railing in the stairwell that the landlord hasn't fixed. A faulty fire alarm in one unit, and peeling paint in the lobby, I said, none of which affect my actual apartment, which is clean and safe and has everything Luna needs. Hardly sounds like the unsuitable environment Mr. Blackwood described, Caroline said. Your Honor, Blackwood stood again. The question isn't whether Miss Morrison loves her child. It's whether she can provide the stability Luna deserves. Mrs. Richardson can offer private schools, a full-time parent, a stable home without code violations or financial stress. Mrs. Richardson can offer money, I interrupted, and Caroline shot me a warning look, but I couldn't stop. She can't offer love. She barely tolerated me when David was alive, and she's using Luna to punish me for not being the daughter-in-law she wanted. This isn't about Luna's welfare, it's about control. Ms. Morrison, Judge Morrison started. I'm sorry, Your Honor, but it's true, I said, my hands gripping the arms of my chair. Margaret has unlimited resources to throw at this case while I'm scraping by on tips and overtime. But I show up for every school event, every doctor's appointment, every bedtime story. I know Luna's favorite color changed from pink to purple last month. I know she's scared of the dark, but won't admit it because she thinks being brave means not being afraid. I know she still cries for her daddy sometimes, and I hold her and cry too, because I miss him just as much. My voice cracked, and I felt tears burning, but I pushed through. I'm not perfect. I work too much because I have to. I'm tired constantly. Sometimes I feed her cereal for dinner because I don't have energy to cook, but I love her with everything I have, and taking her from me won't give her stability. It'll break her heart. The courtroom was silent, and I realized I'd just had an emotional outburst that Caroline had specifically told me to avoid, but I couldn't take it back, and I wasn't sure I wanted to. Ms. Morrison, Judge Morrison said carefully, I understand you're emotional about this situation. I'm emotional because I'm her mother, I said, and no amount of money or lawyers changes that. Your Honor, Caroline interjected quickly. If I may, Miss Morrison has demonstrated consistent care for her daughter, despite extraordinary circumstances. She's a widow working multiple jobs to provide. She's maintained Luna's routine and stability as much as possible, and now she's married and building a more traditional family structure. A family structure built this morning, Blackwood interrupted. A family structure that exists, Caroline corrected. Mr. Donovan has committed to supporting both Miss Morrison and Luna. That's exactly the stability this court should encourage, not punish. Judge Morrison looked between us all, her expression unreadable, and I felt Reese lean forward behind me, close enough that I could almost feel his hand on my shoulder, even though he wasn't touching me. I'm going to take a brief recess, the judge said. I want to review all the evidence and statements. We'll reconvene in 20 minutes. Everyone stood as she left, and the moment the door closed behind her, I felt my knees buckle slightly, but Reese was there immediately, his hand on my elbow steadying me. You did well, he said quietly. I lost control, I said, letting him guide me to a bench outside the courtroom. I wasn't supposed to get emotional. You were honest, Reese corrected. That matters more. Does it? I asked, burying my face in my hands. Or did I just hand Margaret exactly what she wanted? Proof that I'm unstable and emotional. You showed that you're human, Reese said, his hand warm on my back. Any judge worth their position will see the difference between that and actual instability. Caroline appeared with water and her phone. Okay, that was intense, but not necessarily bad. The emotional testimony could work in our favor if the judge sees it as genuine rather than calculated. It was genuine, I said. I know, Caroline replied. That's why it might work. Blackwood's arguments are all about appearance, but you showed substance. That counts. What about the marriage? I asked. Did we just make everything worse? Honestly, I don't know, Caroline admitted. It's unprecedented. But Reese handled himself well on the stand, and the judge didn't seem hostile to it, just skeptical, which is fair. I looked at Reese, who was watching me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Thank you for not throwing me under the bus up there. You could have distanced yourself from my outburst. Why would I do that? Reese asked, seeming genuinely confused. Because it's smart, I said. Because protecting yourself is... I'm not protecting myself, he interrupted. I'm protecting you. That's the entire point. Before I could respond, Caroline's phone rang, and her expression shifted as she answered. She walked a few steps away, spoke in low tones, then returned, looking concerned. That was my investigator, she said. Margaret's team is digging into Reese's background more thoroughly. They might have found something they plan to use if the judge calls us back for more questions. What kind of something? I asked. I don't know yet, Caroline said, looking at Reese. But if there's anything in your past that could be used against you, now would be a good time to tell us. Reese was quiet for a moment, and I saw something that looked like resignation cross his face. There's a lot, he said finally, but most of it isn't mine. It's my family's. If they're smart, they'll stick to what's provable about me specifically, which is limited. And what's provable? Caroline pressed. That I left town at 17 under questionable circumstances, Reese said. That my family business collapsed shortly after. That I've been careful about keeping my distance from them ever since. Why did you leave? I asked. The question that had been building since he'd reappeared in my life. Reese met my eyes, and I saw something painful in his expression. Because staying meant becoming someone I didn't want to be, and because people I cared about were getting hurt. What people? I asked. Before he could answer, the bailiff called us back in, and we filed into the courtroom with my question hanging unanswered, and 20 minutes, suddenly feeling like nowhere near enough time for what was coming.
She defended herself with raw emotion. He stayed calm on the stand despite attacks on his family. And now Margaret's team is digging into his past, which definitely involves her father somehow. The truth is coming, and it's going to hurt.
Chapter 5. The Verdict, and What Comes After. Judge Morrison returned with a stack of papers, and an expression that gave nothing away, and I felt my heart hammering so hard, I was certain everyone in the courtroom could hear it. I've reviewed all testimony and evidence, she began, settling into her chair. This is not an easy case. Both parties clearly care about Luna's welfare, though they disagree fundamentally about what that welfare requires. I felt Reese shift behind me, his presence solid and grounding. Mr. Blackwood, your arguments about stability and resources are noted, Judge Morrison continued. Mrs. Richardson can certainly provide material advantages that Miss Morrison cannot. However, she paused, and I held my breath. This court does not determine custody based solely on financial means. If that were the standard, no working-class parent would ever maintain custody of their children. I felt a flicker of hope. Ms. Morrison has demonstrated consistent involvement in her daughter's life, despite working multiple jobs, the judge said. Her work schedule is demanding. Yes, but she's arranged appropriate care and maintains strong bonds with Luna. The therapy appointments were missed due to scheduling conflicts, not neglect. The medical bills are being paid, albeit slowly. The building violations don't affect her actual living space. Your Honor, Blackwood started, but she held up a hand. I'm not finished. Mr. Blackwood, you raised concerns about Ms. Morrison's recent marriage, suggesting it was calculated for this hearing. While the timing is certainly convenient, I'm not in the business of punishing people for finding support during difficult times. Mr. Donovan's testimony was credible, and his background, while complicated, doesn't disqualify him from being part of Luna's life. I felt tears prick my eyes, but I blinked them back. No, that said, Judge Morrison continued, and my hope wavered. I am concerned about the lack of stability in Luna's current schedule. 3 nights per week with her grandmother, constant shuffling between locations. That's not ideal for a 4-year-old. Your Honor, that's because Mrs. Morrison works to support her child, Caroline started. I understand that, the judge interrupted, which is why my ruling is this. Custody remains with Mrs. Morrison. However, I'm ordering a reassessment in 6 months to ensure the marriage provides actual stability rather than just the appearance of it. I want to see evidence of consistent routine, reduced work hours if possible, and Luna's adjustment to the new family dynamic. Your Honor, that's hardly fair, Blackwood protested. It's completely fair, Judge Morrison said firmly. Mrs. Richardson, you can file for modification again in 6 months if circumstances warrant. But as of today, Luna stays with her mother. This hearing is adjourned. The gavel came down, and for a moment I just sat there in shock, not quite believing what I'd heard. I won. Luna was staying with me. Oh my God, I whispered, and Caroline was hugging me, saying something about this being a great outcome, but all I could process was that my daughter was still mine. I turned to find Reese standing right behind me, and without thinking I threw my arms around him, pressing my face into his chest while tears I couldn't control spilled over. "Thank you," I said against his shirt. "Thank you, thank you, thank you." His arms came around me carefully, like he wasn't sure he had permission, and I felt his hand settle on my back with gentle pressure. "You did this," he said quietly. "Now you won because you're a good mother, and the judge saw that." I just sat there. "You were there," I said, pulling back to look at him. "That's what mattered. You showed up when you didn't have to, and that made all the difference." Something painful flickered across his expression, but before I could ask about it, Margaret appeared with Blackwood beside her, her face tight with barely controlled fury. "This isn't over," she said, her eyes on me. "6 months, Thea. 6 months and I'll be back, and we'll see if your convenient marriage is still intact." "Mrs. Richardson," Reese said, his voice dropping to something cold and dangerous, "I'd suggest you accept the judge's ruling gracefully and focus on being a grandmother instead of trying to steal someone's child. And I'd suggest you stay out of family business, Mr. Donovan," Margaret shot back. "Though I suppose inserting yourself into situations where you don't belong runs in your family, doesn't it?" The words had weight I didn't understand, and I saw Reese go very still. "What's that supposed to mean?" I asked. "Nothing," Margaret said with a brittle smile. "Just an observation. Enjoy your victory, dear. It won't last." She swept out with her lawyers, and I turned to Reese, who was staring after her with an expression I couldn't read. "And what did she mean about your family?" I asked. "Nothing important," Reese said, but his voice was tight. "She's just trying to get under my skin." "Did it work?" "Doesn't matter," he said, his hand finding mine. "You won. Luna's safe. That's what matters." Caroline approached with paperwork and instructions about the 6-month review, and by the time we'd gone over everything and left the courthouse, it was nearly 4 p.m. and I was exhausted in ways that went beyond physical. "I need to pick up Luna," I said, checking my phone to find 3 texts from my mother asking how it went. "She'll be wondering where I am." "I'll drive you," Reese said. "You don't have to." "Thea," he interrupted gently. "We're married. I'm driving you to pick up our daughter." The casual way he said, "our daughter," made something warm and complicated bloom in my chest, and I followed him to his car without arguing further. We drove in comfortable silence for a few blocks before Reese spoke. "You should tell Luna the truth," he said, "or as much of it as she can understand at 4. Kids know when adults are lying to them." "What do I say?" I asked. "That Mommy married a stranger to win a court case." "You say that you got married to someone who cares about both of you," Reese corrected, "and that he's going to be around to help however he can." "For 6 months," I added. "And then what? The judge orders another review, and we get divorced, and Luna has to deal with another person leaving. Or we don't get divorced," Reese said quietly. I turned to stare at him. "What?" "I'm just saying it's an option," he said, his eyes on the road. 6 months is long enough to figure out if this could be real instead of just practical. "Reese, we barely know each other. We knew each other once," he interrupted, "and we could know each other again, if you wanted to." My heart was doing complicated things in my chest. "Why would you want that? You could have anyone. Why tie yourself to a broke single mother fighting custody battles?" "Because you're not just a broke single mother," Reese said, his voice soft. "You're Thea Morrison. You're the girl who let me hide out in the library when I was skipping class, who tutored me in history even though I never asked, who looked at me like I could be something better than what my family was." The memory hit me suddenly. Sophomore year, finding him in the back corner of the library looking lost and offering to help with his homework, and the way he'd looked at me like I'd done something extraordinary instead of just being decent. "I remember," I said quietly. "So do I," Reese replied. "I remember all of it. Every conversation, every look, every moment. I was too much of a coward to act on what I felt, because I knew I'd just hurt you eventually." "And now?" I asked. "Now I'm trying not to be a coward," he said. "Now I'm trying to actually show up instead of running away." We pulled up to my mother's house before I could respond, and I sat there for a moment trying to process everything. The hearing, the victory, this conversation that felt like it was tipping us towards something I wasn't sure I was ready for. "Come meet her," I said finally. "Luna, you should meet her if you're going to be part of this." "Are you sure?" Reese asked. "No," I admitted, "but I'm doing it anyway." We walked up to the house together, and my mother opened the door before I could knock, pulling me into a fierce hug. "How did it go?" she asked urgently. "We won," I said, and watched relief flood her face. "Luna stays with me. 6-month review, but we won." "Oh, thank God," my mother said, then seemed to notice Reese standing behind me. "And this is Reese Donovan," he said, offering his hand. "Mrs. Morrison, nice to see you again." My mother's eyes widened with recognition. "Vincent Donovan's son." "Yes, ma'am," Reese said, and I heard something careful in his tone. "Mom, can we not?" I started, but Luna's voice calling, "Mommy," cut through everything else, and suddenly she was barreling toward me with her backpack bouncing and her face bright with excitement. "Baby," I said, catching her and lifting her despite my exhausted arms. "I missed you so much." "Missed you too," Luna said, then seemed to notice Reese. "Who's that?" "This is Reese," I said, setting her down but keeping hold of her hand. He's someone very special to Mommy. He's going to be around a lot more now." "Why?" Luna asked with 4-year-old directness. "Because he cares about us," I said, looking at Reese, who was watching Luna with an expression that made my chest ache. "And because we care about him." Luna studied Reese with the kind of assessment only small children can pull off. "Do you like pizza?" "I love pizza," Reese said seriously. "Good," Luna declared. "Do you like princesses?" "I think princesses are very cool," he replied. "Okay," Luna said, apparently satisfied. "You can stay." I felt tears burn behind my eyes again, because if only all of life's complications could be solved with questions about pizza and princesses. "Luna, baby, I need to tell you something," I said, kneeling down to her level. "Mommy and Reese got married today. Do you know what that means?" "Like in movies?" Luna asked. "With the pretty dress?" "Sort of," I said. "It means Reese is part of our family now. He's going to help take care of us." "Like a daddy?" Luna asked. And my heart broke a little because she was too young to remember David clearly, just knew that other kids had daddies and she didn't. "Different from your daddy," I said carefully. "Nobody can replace Daddy, but Reese wants to be here for us, to help us, to be part of our family." Luna looked at Reese thoughtfully. "Will you read me stories?" "If you want me to," Reese said. "And play with my dolls." "Absolutely." "And not leave?" Luna asked. And the question was so small and vulnerable that I saw Reese visibly flinch. "I'm not going anywhere," he said, and the conviction in his voice made me believe him despite every logical reason I shouldn't. Luna seemed satisfied with that and grabbed Reese's hand. "Come see my room. I have 17 stuffed animals." 17 is a very respectable number, Reese said, letting himself be pulled inside, and I watched this dangerous man who'd volunteered to marry me follow my daughter upstairs to look at stuffed animals, and felt something in my chest crack wide open. My mother touched my arm gently. "Thea, honey, are you sure about this? The Donovan family. Isn't Reese?" I finished. "I know his family has a history, Mom, but he's not them. He's trying to help us." "I know Vincent Donovan," my mother said quietly. "Your father worked for him, remember? Before everything fell apart." I froze. "What?" "Your father worked for Vincent Donovan's company," she repeated. "The construction business. That's where he was employed before the accusations and the layoffs and everything that destroyed our finances." Ice flooded my veins as pieces started clicking together in ways I didn't want to examine. "Like, when was this?" I asked. "You were 16? 17 maybe," my mother said. "Your father came home one day saying he'd been fired, that they'd accused him of theft, of skimming money from projects. It wasn't true. Your father was the most honest man I knew, but they had paperwork, witnesses, things he couldn't fight. We lost everything trying to clear his name. And you never told me this," I said, my voice hollow. "You were busy with school, with your own life," my mother said. "We didn't want to burden you with adult problems. By the time it affected you enough to notice, your father had already given up fighting. He just wanted to move forward." I heard Luna's laughter from upstairs, heard Reese's deeper voice responding to something she'd said, and I felt something cold settle in my stomach. "The Donovan company shut down shortly after," my mother continued. "FBI investigation, federal charges, the whole family scattered. I always wondered if what happened to your father was part of whatever they were trying to hide." "Mom," I said slowly, "what exactly are you saying?" "I'm saying be careful," she replied. "Reese Donovan might be a nice young man now, but his family destroyed ours 12 years ago. That's not something you can just forget because he's being helpful." I stood there in my mother's hallway with my world tilting sideways, and when Reese appeared at the top of the stairs with Luna on his hip, both of them smiling about something, I felt my heart break in a way I hadn't expected, because suddenly Margaret's comment made sense. Suddenly Reese's guilt made sense. Suddenly everything about why he'd volunteered to help me, why he'd shown up at that diner, why he'd been so insistent about making things right, it all made horrible, devastating sense. He wasn't helping me out of love or attraction or even simple kindness. He was trying to pay a debt I hadn't even known existed, a debt his family had created when they destroyed mine. Chapter 6. The Truth He Carried. I managed to keep it together through dinner. Pizza that Reese ordered without asking about cost. Luna chattering about her day at Grandma's. My mother watching us with worried eyes. But the knowledge sat in my stomach like a stone, getting heavier with each forced smile. Reese drove us back to my apartment around 7, Luna falling asleep in the back seat with her head against the window, and the silence between us felt different now, weighted with things I knew and things I needed him to confirm. "I'll carry her up," Reese said when we parked, and I watched him lift Luna with careful gentleness, her small body curling instinctively against his chest, and something in me ached because she trusted him already, and I didn't know if that trust was built on lies. My apartment felt smaller with Reese in it, his presence filling the space in ways I wasn't prepared for, and I focused on the familiar routine of getting Luna changed into pajamas and tucked into bed, letting muscle memory override the chaos in my head. Reese read me 3 stories. Luna mumbled sleepily when I kissed her forehead. He does funny voices. Does he? I asked, my throat tight. Can he come back tomorrow? We'll see, baby, I said. Sleep now. She was out within seconds, the way only exhausted 4-year-olds can manage, and I stood there looking at her peaceful face and trying to figure out how to handle what came next. Reese was in the living room when I emerged, standing by the window looking out at the parking lot, and the tension in his shoulders told me he knew something had changed. Your mother told you, he said without turning around. And that my father worked for your family, I said, keeping my voice low so Luna wouldn't wake. That he was accused of theft and fired and we lost everything because of it. Yeah, she mentioned that. Reese turned finally, and the guilt on his face was so raw it almost made me feel sorry for him. Almost. Thea, is it true? I interrupted. Did your father's company destroy my family? Yes, he said, and the simple honesty of it hurt worse than a lie would have. Your father was a foreman on one of our construction sites. Someone was skimming money from materials budgets. When the FBI started investigating, they needed a scapegoat. Your father was convenient. I felt like I'd been punched. Convenient. He was honest, kept perfect records, had access to the accounts, Reese said, his voice hollow. They framed him with falsified documents and testimony from people my father paid off. Your dad lost his job, his reputation, everything. And you knew, I said, the pieces falling into place with devastating clarity. You knew this was happening. I was 17, Reese said, but it sounded like an excuse even to his own ears. I found out by accident, overheard my father and uncle planning it. I confronted my father, told him your dad was innocent, that this was wrong. What did he say? I asked, though I already knew the answer wouldn't make this better. He said, business was business, Reese replied, that your father was collateral damage, that I needed to learn how the real world worked if I was going to take over someday. And you just accepted that, I challenged, anger starting to burn through the shock. You just let them destroy an innocent man and his family. No, Reese said sharply. I didn't accept it. I told my father I wouldn't be part of it, that I'd go to the FBI myself if he went through with it. But you didn't go to the FBI, I said. No, he admitted, because my father made it clear that if I talked, he'd make sure your family suffered even more. He'd manufacture more evidence, make it impossible for your dad to ever work again, maybe even get him arrested. I was 17 and terrified, and I believed him. So instead you just left, I said, and I heard the bitterness in my voice. You ran away and let my family fall apart while you, salved your conscience by staying away from the business. I left because staying meant becoming complicit, Reese said. And I left because every day I spent in that house, around those people, I felt like I was drowning. And yes, I ran. I was a coward who convinced himself that leaving was noble instead of just convenient. And you never thought to tell me, I asked. In 12 years, you never thought, maybe I should let Thea know her family was destroyed by mine. I thought about it constantly, Reese said, moving closer. Every single day. But what was I supposed to say? Well, sorry your life fell apart. It was my family's fault, and I did nothing to stop it. How does that help you? It would have been honest, I said. It would have given me a choice about whether I wanted you in my life instead of manipulating me into marrying you out of guilt. I didn't manipulate you, Reese said, his voice hardening. You needed help. I offered. Everything I've done has been real. Thea, built on a lie, I countered. You didn't volunteer because you cared about me or Luna. You volunteered because you felt guilty about something that happened 12 years ago. Both things can be true, Reese said desperately. Yes, I feel guilty. Yes, I've carried this for years, but I also care about you. I always have. The guilt brought me back, but that's not why I stayed. I don't believe you, I said, even though part of me wanted to. And I think you saw a chance to feel less guilty about your cowardice and you took it, and I was stupid enough to let you. You weren't stupid, Reese said. You were desperate, and I offered a solution. That doesn't make you stupid. It makes you human. It makes me someone you used, I said, my voice breaking slightly. Someone you lied to by omission every single time you looked at me and didn't tell me the truth. I was trying to help, Reese said. You were trying to feel better about yourself, I shot back. "There's a difference." We stared at each other across my tiny living room, and I felt tears burning but refused to let them fall because I'd cried enough today, and he didn't deserve to see me break down. "What do you want me to say?" Reese asked finally. "That I'm sorry. I'm sorry. That I should have done more. That I've spent 12 years wishing I could go back and make different choices. I have. None of that changes what happened, but it's all true. I want you to leave," I said, the words coming out quieter than I intended. Reese looked like I'd physically struck him. "Thea, please," I said. "Just go. I need to think, and I can't do that with you here. We're married," he said, like that mattered now. "Legally married. The judge expects us to demonstrate stability for 6 months. Then we'll figure that out," I said. But tonight, right now, I need you to leave my apartment." He stood there for a long moment, and I watched him struggle with the urge to argue, to push, to try to fix this, before he finally nodded. "Okay," he said, "I'll go. But Thea, this conversation isn't over. We need to talk about this properly." "Maybe," I said, "but not tonight." He moved toward the door, then paused. "For what it's worth, I meant what I said in the courtroom. About wanting to be part of your life. That wasn't guilt talking. That was real. I don't know what's real anymore," I admitted. "That's fair," Reese said quietly. "I'll call tomorrow to check in about the review requirements, figure out logistics." "Fine," I said. He left, and I locked the door behind him and stood there in my empty apartment feeling like the ground had shifted beneath me in ways I couldn't compensate for. I'd won the custody hearing. I had my daughter safe and sleeping in the next room. I had a marriage that might keep Margaret away for 6 months, and I had a husband who'd been carrying guilt about destroying my family for over a decade and never thought to mention it before offering to save me. My phone buzzed with a text from my mother. "Mom, did you talk to him?" Me, "Yes, Mom," and me, "And I don't know what to do with any of this." "Mom, come stay here tonight, both of you. You shouldn't be alone." Me, "I'm okay, Mom. Luna's asleep and I just need to think." "Mom, your father forgave them, before he died. Said holding on to anger was too exhausting." The text hit harder than it should have, because my father had died 3 years ago from a heart attack that the doctors said was partly stress-related, and I'd always wondered what stress he'd been carrying that he never shared. Now I knew. Me, Dad was better than me. Mom, Dad was tired. There's a difference. "You're allowed to be angry, honey. Just don't let it consume you." I set my phone down and moved to Luna's room, standing in the doorway watching her sleep with her stuffed rabbit clutched to her chest. And I thought about my father who'd been accused of crimes he didn't commit, who'd lost everything trying to clear his name, who'd carried that injustice silently so his family wouldn't see him broken. And I thought about Reese at 17, finding out what his family was doing and being too scared to stop it, living with that knowledge and that cowardice for 12 years until a chance encounter gave him an opportunity to do something, anything, to make it right. It didn't excuse what he'd done. It didn't erase the fact that he'd lied by omission, but it made him human instead of monstrous, and that somehow made it all more complicated. My phone buzzed again, this time with Reese's name. "Reese, I know you don't want to hear from me right now, but I need you to know something. I didn't marry you to ease my guilt. I married you because 12 years ago, I was too much of a coward to be what you deserved, and I'm trying not to make that mistake again. I'm trying to show up, even if I did it wrong, even if I hurt you in the process. I'm here and I'm not running this time. That has to count for something." I stared at the text for a long time, reading it over and over, and I didn't know if it counted for anything or not. All I knew was that tomorrow I'd wake up still married to him, still bound by a 6-month review that required us to demonstrate stability, still trying to figure out if the man who'd saved me was also the boy who'd failed me, and somehow I'd have to find a way to exist in that complicated middle ground, at least until I figured out which version of Reese Donovan was real. Chapter 7. Showing up. The next 3 days existed in a strange limbo where I was legally married to someone I wasn't speaking to, and the cognitive dissonance was exhausting in ways that went beyond the normal single-mother exhaustion I'd grown accustomed to. Reese texted every morning, simple, practical messages about the 6-month review requirements, asking if I needed anything, offering to help with Luna, and I responded with equally practical yes or no answers, because engaging further felt like opening a door I wasn't ready to walk through. Reese, the court wants documentation of stable living arrangements. I can put together a portfolio showing financial security and consistent routine if that helps. Me, that's fine. Reese, Luna's preschool fees are due next week. I can handle that. Me, I can pay my own daughter's school fees. Reese, I know you can, but we're married, which means legally it's our money now. Let me help. Me, fine. Luna asked about Reese approximately 17 times in those 3 days, wanting to know when he was coming back, if he was mad at us, if she'd done something wrong, and each question felt like a knife because I'd let her get attached to someone I wasn't sure we could trust. "He's just busy with work, baby," I said on day 3 when she asked again at bedtime. "But he still cares about us." "Did you have a fight?" Luna asked with the perception of someone who'd lived through her father's death and understood that adults didn't always tell the truth about why people disappeared. "Sort of," I admitted, because lying felt worse than simplifying. "But we're working on it. Daddy and Nana used to fight," Luna said quietly, meaning David and Margaret. "And then Daddy died, and Nana got mean." My heart broke a little. "Reese isn't going anywhere, sweetheart. I promise." "You don't know that," Luna said, and she was right. She was absolutely right, and I held her until she fell asleep because I didn't have better answers. On day 4, I came home from my shift at the diner to find Reese's car in the parking lot, and my first instinct was irritation that he'd shown up without asking. But then I saw he was just sitting there, not approaching the building, like he was giving me the choice of whether to engage. I stood by my car for a moment, weighing options, before walking over and tapping on his window. He looked surprised to see me, which was fair since I'd been avoiding him, and rolled down the window. "Hi," he said carefully. "What are you doing here?" I asked. "Making sure you got home safely," Reese said. "I know you work late shifts and the parking lot isn't well lit, and I just needed to know you were okay." "You can't just sit in parking lots watching my apartment," I said. "That's borderline stalking." "I know," he agreed. "What? But the alternative is not knowing if you're safe, and I can't handle that right now." I should have been angry, should have told him this was inappropriate and controlling, but mostly I was just tired, and seeing him sitting there looking as exhausted as I felt made something in me soften slightly. "Have you eaten?" I asked, surprising myself. "Not since lunch," Reese admitted. "Come up," I said. "We need to talk anyway, and I'm not doing it in a parking lot." I saw hope flicker across his face before he controlled it, and he followed me up to the apartment where Luna had fallen asleep on the couch waiting for me, her current picture book abandoned beside her. "She missed you," I said quietly, watching Reese look at her with an expression I couldn't quite name. "Kept asking when you were coming back." "I missed her too," he said. I know that sounds insane given I've known her less than a week, but I did." I moved to the kitchen and started pulling out leftovers, letting the familiar motions of reheating food give me something to focus on that wasn't the man standing in my living room looking lost. "I talked to my mom more," I said, keeping my voice low so Luna wouldn't wake, "about what happened with Dad. She said he tried to fight it at first, hired a lawyer, tried to prove the documents were fake." "They were fake," Reese said. "My father had someone forge Dad's signature, create false invoices, make it look like he'd been stealing for months." "How do you know that for sure?" I asked, turning to face him. "Because I saw the real documents," Reese said, "before they were destroyed. I made copies, actually. Thought maybe I could use them to prove what was happening. But I was 17 and scared, and my father found them," and he stopped, his hand unconsciously going to his ribs. "And what?" I pressed. "And he made it very clear that if I interfered, your family would suffer more than they already were," Reese said quietly. "He had connections. Thea, police, judges, people who owed him favors. He could have made your father's life so much worse." So I kept quiet and hated myself for it. I put together plates in silence, processing this, and we sat at my small kitchen table eating reheated pasta at midnight like this was somehow normal. "My mom said Dad forgave your family before he died," I said after a few minutes. "Did you know that?" Reese looked up sharply. "No. How would I know that?" "I don't know," I said. I thought maybe you'd kept tabs on us over the years. You knew where I worked, where I lived. I Googled you once a year," Reese admitted, "on your birthday, just to make sure you were okay, that you'd gotten out, that you were building the life you deserved. But I never contacted your family or looked into your parents specifically." "Why my birthday?" I asked, curious despite myself. "Because that's the day I'd let myself think about you," he said simply. The rest of the year I tried to move forward, build something separate from my family, become someone who wasn't defined by their name. But on October 15th, I'd let myself remember everything I'd walked away from. The honesty of it hurt, and I looked down at my plate because meeting his eyes felt too intimate. "The court counselor called today," I said, changing the subject. "They want to do a home visit next week. See how we're functioning as a family unit." "What did you tell them?" Reese asked. "That we'd be available," I said, "because despite everything, I need this marriage to look real for 6 months or Margaret gets another chance to take Luna." "It is real," Reese said. "We're legally married. We just need to figure out what that means for us." "I don't know what it means," I admitted. "I'm angry at you for lying. I'm angry at your family for what they did to mine. But I'm also grateful you helped me, and Luna likes you, and I don't know how to reconcile all of those things." "You don't have to reconcile them immediately," Reese said. "You can be angry and grateful simultaneously. Humans are complicated." "That's convenient for you, I said, but without real heat. It's honest, he corrected. Thea, I'm not asking you to forgive me or trust me or feel anything you're not ready to feel. I'm just asking you to let me show up. Let me be here, help with Luna, prove through actions instead of words that I'm not the coward I was at 17. And if I can't, I challenged, if 6 months from now I still can't get past this, then we get divorced and I disappear from your life again, Reese said, and I heard real pain in his voice. But at least I'll know I tried. That I didn't run this time. Luna stirred on the couch, mumbling something in her sleep, and we both went quiet watching her, and when she settled again, I felt the weight of everything pressing down. You can stay tonight, I said finally. On the couch. The counselor will want to see evidence of cohabitation, and it'll be easier if you're actually here. Are you sure? Reese asked. No, I said honestly. Ma, but I'm doing it anyway. I found him blankets and a pillow, gave him a t-shirt that had been David's that I'd kept for reasons I couldn't articulate, and left him in the living room while I got ready for bed. But sleep was elusive, and around 2 a.m. I gave up and went to the kitchen for water, finding Reese awake on the couch staring at the ceiling. Can't sleep either, I asked. Too much on my mind, he said, sitting up. You. Same, I admitted, sitting in the chair across from him. Can I ask you something? Anything, Reese said. What happened after you left? Where did you go? He was quiet for a moment, and I watched shadows play across his face from the streetlight through the window. I went to my mother's family in Boston, he said finally. They'd cut ties with my father years before, but agreed to take me in. I finished high school there, worked 3 jobs to pay for community college, eventually got into business school on scholarship, built everything from nothing because I didn't want to touch money that came from what my family did. That must have been hard, I said. It was necessary, Reese corrected. I needed to prove to myself I could be something other than Vincent Donovan's son, that I could build success without corruption. Did it work? I asked. Mostly, he said. I'm good at what I do. I help legitimate businesses restructure, renegotiate contracts, stay afloat during hard times. It's clean work, honest work, but I still carry what my family did. Still feel like I'm trying to balance scales that can never actually be balanced. Is that why you helped me? I asked quietly. To balance scales, partly, Reese admitted. But also because when I saw you in that diner looking exhausted and desperate and still trying to hold it together, I saw the same girl who used to share her lunch with me when she noticed I wasn't eating, who treated me like I was worth something when everyone else treated me like I was dangerous. You were kind to me when you didn't have to be, and I wanted to be that for you. I'm not that girl anymore, I said. No, Reese agreed. You're stronger now. You're a mother fighting for her child. You're someone who sacrifices constantly without complaint. You're better than that girl was. Stop, I said, uncomfortable with the praise. I'm just trying to survive. Survival with grace is still remarkable, Reese said. We sat in comfortable silence for a few minutes, and I felt something shift slightly between us. Not forgiveness, exactly, but maybe the beginning of understanding. Thank you, I said finally, for the preschool fees, for sitting in that parking lot even though it was creepy, for showing up even when I told you to leave. Thank you for letting me back in, Reese replied, even just a little. I went back to bed eventually, and this time sleep came easier. And when I woke up at 6 to get Luna ready for preschool, I found Reese already awake making coffee with the kind of quiet competence that suggested he'd navigated strange kitchens before. Morning, he said, offering me a cup. Morning, I replied, and when Luna emerged rubbing sleep from her eyes and saw Reese, her face lit up in a way that made my chest ache. You came back, she said, running to him. I came back, Reese agreed, catching her. Is that okay? Very okay, Luna declared. Can you make pancakes? I can attempt pancakes, Reese said, looking at me for permission. Go for it, I said, and watched him navigate my kitchen while Luna supervised from a chair, telling him exactly how she liked her pancakes, chocolate chips in a smiley face pattern. And I felt something warm and terrifying curl in my chest. This was dangerous. This feeling of family, of partnership, of not being alone. Because it was built on complicated history and guilt and lies by omission, and I didn't know if that foundation was strong enough to support what we were building. But watching Reese flip pancakes while Luna giggled and directed him, I found myself hoping it might be, at least for 6 months, at least long enough to figure out if this could be real.
So, my dears, how emotional are we feeling? If you made it this far, tell me, what score would you give this story so far? From 1 to 10. I'd also like to give a special thank you to our new members, Diana Need and Luna Azul. A big kiss to you both.
Chapter 8. Building Something Real. The court counselor, a woman named Patricia Chen, who had kind eyes and a notebook she filled with careful observations, arrived exactly on time the following Tuesday, and I'd spent the entire morning stress cleaning my apartment until Reese gently took the vacuum from my hands. It's clean enough, he said. She's not here to judge your housekeeping. She's here to see if Luna is happy and safe. What if she asks questions I can't answer? I said, anxiety making my voice tight. What if she figures out we barely know each other? Then we tell her the truth, Reese said, his hand settling on my shoulders. That we've known each other a long time, reconnected recently, and we're building something together. All of that is true. You make it sound simple, I said. It is simple, he replied. We care about each other and we're trying. That's all anyone can ask. Luna chose that moment to run through the living room, wearing a tutu over her jeans and a tiara, and Reese caught her mid-sprint. Whoa, where's the princess going in such a hurry? He asked. To show the lady my room, Luna announced. Mommy said a lady is coming to visit and I have to show her my stuffed animals. That's very responsible of you, Reese said seriously. Do you have your 17 animals arranged? 18 now, Luna corrected proudly. You bought me the elephant. Remember? I'd forgotten about the elephant, a casual gift Reese had brought over 3 days ago after Luna mentioned liking them, but he hadn't, and watching them together made something warm bloom in my chest. The doorbell rang and I took a breath, smoothing down my shirt one more time before opening it. Ms. Morrison, Patricia Chen said with a smile. I'm Patricia from Family Services. Thank you for agreeing to meet today. Of course, I said, stepping aside. Please come in. This is my husband Reese, and that's Luna. Luna had frozen mid-twirl when the door opened, but now she approached cautiously. Hi, do you want to see my room? I'd love to, Patricia said warmly, and I watched my daughter lead this stranger away with complete confidence, while I stood there feeling like my entire future hung on the next hour. The interview was surprisingly relaxed. Patricia asked about our routines, how we divided household responsibilities, what Luna's typical day looked like, how we handled discipline in bedtime and meals. Reese and I answered honestly, and I was grateful for the 3 days he'd been staying over, because we'd naturally fallen into patterns that made cohabitation feel real. And how long have you been married? Patricia asked, pen poised over her notebook. Almost 2 weeks, I said. We got married the morning of the custody hearing. That's quite recent, Patricia observed. And can you tell me about your relationship before that? We went to high school together, Reese said, and I was grateful he took the lead because my mouth felt dry. Lost touch after I left town, but we reconnected about 2 months ago when I came back to the area, started spending time together, realized we'd both been thinking about each other for years. And the decision to marry when you did, Patricia asked. I could have lied, could have made it sound more romantic, but something in Patricia's eyes told me honesty would serve us better. The timing was influenced by the custody situation, I admitted. Margaret was arguing that Luna needed a 2-parent household and I couldn't provide that alone. Reese offered to help, and we realized that what we were building was real enough to make it official. So it was practical as well as romantic, Patricia said. Is that allowed? I asked, trying for lightness. Can marriages be both? Patricia smiled. Most good marriages are. The question is whether it's sustainable, whether you're building something that will last beyond the immediate crisis. We're trying to, I said, and I felt Reese's hand find mine under the table, his fingers lacing through mine with comfortable certainty. It's not perfect, and we're still figuring things out, but we're committed to making it work. For Luna's sake, Patricia asked. For all our sakes, Reese said. Luna deserves a stable home, yes, but Thea deserves a partner who supports her, and I deserve a chance to be part of something good. Those things don't have to be mutually exclusive. Patricia made notes, and I tried not to panic about what she was writing. And then Luna reappeared, dragging Patricia toward her room to show off the promised stuffed animal collection. She's really attached to you, I said to Reese when we were alone. It's only been a week and she acts like you've always been here. Is that bad? He asked carefully. I don't know yet, I admitted, but it scares me. Because if this doesn't work, if we can't make it 6 months, she'll lose another person. Then we make it work, Reese said simply. You say that like it's easy. It's not easy, he corrected. But it's worth it. She's worth it. You're worth it. Before I could respond, Patricia returned with Luna, and we wrapped up the interview with promises that she'd submit her report within the week, and recommendations for the 6-month review. For what it's worth, Patricia said at the door, Luna seems happy and secure. That's what matters most to the court. Keep doing what you're doing. When she left, I felt my knees go weak with relief, and Reese caught me before I could sink to the floor. See, he said, we did fine. We did better than fine, I said, and then I was hugging him, my face pressed against his chest while he held me with careful gentleness. Thank you for being here, for saying the right things, for not making me feel like I'm doing this alone. You're not alone, Reese said against my hair. Not anymore. That weekend, Reese suggested taking Luna to the zoo, and my first instinct was to refuse because it felt too much like playing happy family, but Luna overheard and got so excited that saying no became impossible. Can we see the elephants? She asked for approximately the 20th time as we walked through the entrance. Yes, we can see the elephants, I confirmed, and the giraffes and the penguins and whatever else you want. Can Reese carry me when my legs get tired? Luna asked. If he doesn't mind, I said, looking at him. I definitely don't mind, Reese replied, and Luna immediately grabbed his hand like this was settled. Watching them together over the next 3 hours, Reese lifting Luna so she could see over the crowd at the penguin exhibit, buying her overpriced zoo lemonade without blinking, explaining random animal facts with the kind of patience I'd run out of hours ago. I felt something shift in my chest. This wasn't just practical anymore. This wasn't just about custody hearings and court orders. This was starting to feel like family. You're good with her, I said, when Luna ran ahead to look at the flamingos. Natural in a way I wouldn't have expected from someone who's never had kids. I like her, Reese said simply. She's funny and smart and says exactly what she's thinking. It's refreshing. Most people find 4-year-olds exhausting, I pointed out. Most people aren't trying to prove they deserve to be in their lives, Reese replied, and the honesty of it made me stop walking. Is that what this is? I asked. You trying to prove something? Yes, he said without hesitation. I'm trying to prove I'm not the person who ran away anymore, that I can show up and stay and be someone you and Luna can count on. And if you prove it, I asked. What then? Then maybe you let me stay, Reese said, his eyes finding mine. Not because you need me for the court case, but because you want me here. My heart was doing complicated things, and I was saved from responding by Luna running back to grab both our hands. Come see the flamingos, she demanded. And they're so pink. We followed her, and for the rest of the afternoon I let myself just exist in the moment, eating overpriced hot dogs, taking pictures of Luna with various animals, laughing when she tried to convince us to buy her a stuffed giraffe taller than she was. And when we got home and I was putting an exhausted Luna to bed, she looked up at me with sleepy eyes and asked, Is Reese staying forever? I don't know, baby, I said honestly. But he's here now, and that's what matters. I hope he stays forever, Luna mumbled, already half asleep. I like having a family again. The words broke something in me, and I had to leave her room before I started crying. And I found Reese in the kitchen doing dishes because of course he was. She asked if you're staying forever, I said, leaning against the counter. Reese's hands stilled in the soapy water. Oh, what did you tell her? That I don't know, I admitted. Because I don't. Reese, I'm trying here. I really am. I'm trying to get past the anger and the history and let this be what it could be. But I'm scared. Of what? He asked, turning to face me. Of believing this is real and then having it fall apart, I said. Of Luna getting more attached and then losing you. Of letting myself care about you and discovering it was all guilt on your part and desperation on mine. It's not just guilt, Reese said, moving closer. Thea, I won't lie and say the guilt isn't part of it. Because it is. But that's not why I want to stay. I want to stay because you make me laugh when you're stressed by doing that thing where you reorganize the same shelf 3 times. Because Luna asked me to read her the same book 5 nights in a row, and I genuinely enjoyed it every time. Because I wake up on your couch and think, this is where I want to be, instead of feeling trapped. That's just novelty, I said weakly. You've only been here a week and a half. Then let me prove it's not, Reese said. Give me the 6 months the court ordered. Let me show up every day and be here and build something with you. And if at the end of 6 months you still think it's just guilt, then I'll walk away. You'd actually leave, I asked. If I asked you to. If that's what you needed, he said. But I really hope you won't. I looked at him standing in my tiny kitchen with dish soap on his hands and sincerity in his eyes, and I made a decision that felt both terrifying and inevitable. Okay? I said. 6 months. But I need you to be honest with me about everything. No more secrets about the past. No hiding things because you think it'll protect me. Deal, Reese said immediately. And I need you to understand that I'm going to be difficult sometimes, I continued. That I'm going to question things and push back and probably drive you crazy. I'm counting on it, he said with a slight smile. And Luna comes first, I added. Always. If this starts to hurt her, if she's getting too attached and it's going to end badly, we stop before it gets worse. Agreed, Reese said. Anything else? I moved closer, reaching up to cup his face in my hands, and watched his eyes darken. Kiss me. What? He asked, like he wasn't sure he'd heard correctly. Kiss me, I repeated. If we're doing this, if we're actually trying to build something real, then I need to know if there's chemistry beyond just convenience. So kiss me. Reese didn't need to be asked 3 times. His hands came up to frame my face, gentle and certain, and then his mouth was on mine and everything else fell away. The kiss was slow and deep, and tasted like possibility, his lips moving against mine with a gentleness that contradicted the intensity I felt radiating from him, and when I pressed closer, he made a sound low in his throat that sent heat flooding through me. We broke apart breathing hard, and I rested my forehead against his while my heart hammered. So, Reese asked, his voice rough, chemistry or convenience? Definitely chemistry, I admitted. That's both good and problematic. Why problematic? Because it makes it harder to think clearly, I said, and I need to be able to think clearly for the next 6 months. Fair, Reese agreed, but his hand stayed on my waist like he wasn't quite ready to let go. For what it's worth, I've been thinking about kissing you since you were 16 and let me hide in the library. That's a long time to wait, I said. Worth it, he replied, and kissed me again, briefer this time, but no less intense. And standing in my kitchen at 10 p.m. with the dishes still half done, and my daughter asleep in the next room, and my life still complicated beyond measure, I felt something I hadn't felt in 2 years. Hope. Not the desperate hope of someone drowning, but the real kind. The kind that said maybe, possibly, this could actually work. Chapter 9. The Choice We Make. 3 months later, life developed a rhythm I hadn't expected. Reese staying over most nights but keeping his own apartment to maintain boundaries. Luna treating him like he'd always been part of our lives. And me slowly learning what it meant to have a partner, instead of just surviving alone. Small things changed first. Reese started picking Luna up from preschool on Tuesdays when I had the late shift, and she'd come home chattering about how they'd stopped for ice cream or gone to the park. He fixed the kitchen cabinet that had been broken for 8 months, replaced the smoke detector I kept forgetting about, and somehow my car started running better after he just took a quick look at it. You don't have to fix everything, I said one evening, watching him repair Luna's favorite doll that had lost an arm. I like being useful, Reese replied, his focus on the tiny stitches he was making. And besides, watching Luna's face when her doll works again is worth the effort. You're good at this, I observed. The domestic stuff. I wouldn't have guessed that about you. My mother's family believed in practical skills, he said. My aunt taught me to sew. My uncle taught me basic carpentry. They said if I was going to reject my father's money, I needed to know how to take care of myself. Do you miss them? I asked. Your mom's family. Sometimes, Reese admitted, but they understood when I said I needed to come back here, that there were things I needed to make right. The bigger things changed slower. Reese started leaving clothes in my closet, toiletries in the bathroom, and I found myself consulting him about decisions instead of just handling everything alone. When Luna's preschool called saying she'd been in a minor accident on the playground, I called Reese first, and he met me at the urgent care within 15 minutes. She's okay, the doctor assured us after examining Luna's scraped knee. Just needs cleaning and a bandage. I was so scared, I admitted to Reese in the waiting room, while Luna got her Band-Aid with cartoon characters. The school said, accident, and I immediately thought the worst. That's normal, Reese said, his hand finding mine. She's your entire world. Of course you were scared. Our world, I corrected quietly, and watched his expression shift into something warm and surprised. Yeah, he agreed. Our world. We fell into couple routines without discussing it. Friday night movies after Luna went to bed, Sunday morning breakfast together, him cooking while I handled dishes because I was terrible at cooking and he actually enjoyed it. And somewhere in all of that, the anger I'd been carrying started to fade into something more complicated. And I talked to my mom about your family again, I said one night after Luna was asleep, the two of us on the couch with comfortable space between us. Told her we were making this work. How did she take it? Reese asked carefully. Better than expected, I admitted. She said Dad would have approved, that he always believed people could change if they worked at it. I wish I'd gotten to apologize to him, Reese said quietly, before he died. To tell him I knew what my family did was wrong, that I was sorry I didn't stop it. He knew you were 17 and scared, I said. Mom told me he never blamed you specifically, just the situation. That's generous of him, Reese said. He was a generous person, I replied. Which is why what your family did hurt so much. He gave them honest work, and they destroyed him for it. I know, Reese said, and I can't fix that. But I can try to be the kind of man he would have approved of for his daughter. The words settled between us, and I shifted closer, letting my head rest on his shoulder. You're doing okay so far. His arm came around me automatically, and we sat there watching some cooking show. Neither of us was really paying attention to, and it felt easy in ways that terrified and comforted me simultaneously. The real test came in month 4, when Margaret filed her motion for another hearing, claiming that Patricia Chen's report was biased and demanding a full reassessment. She can't do that, can she? I asked Caroline over the phone, panic rising in my chest. The judge already ruled. She can file whatever she wants, Caroline said, but the judge doesn't have to grant it, especially since Patricia's report was glowing. She specifically noted that Luna is thriving and the home environment is stable. So we just ignore it, I asked. For now, Caroline confirmed. I'll file a response, but unless the judge orders another hearing, Margaret is just wasting everyone's time. I hung up and found Reese watching me with concern. Margaret again. She's trying to force another hearing, I said, sinking onto the couch. He says Patricia's report was biased because we charmed her or something. Patricia Chen doesn't strike me as someone who can be charmed, Reese observed. She's a professional doing her job. I know, I said, but Margaret has unlimited money to keep filing motions and making our lives difficult, and I'm just so tired of it. Then we make her tired, Reese said, sitting beside me. Oh, we keep showing up. Keep proving Luna is happy and safe. Keep building this life until Margaret realizes she's fighting a losing battle. And if she never realizes that, I challenged, then we fight as long as it takes, Reese said simply. I'm not going anywhere, Thea. Not when things get difficult. Not when it's inconvenient. Not when Margaret throws more legal threats. I'm here. I looked at him, really looked at him, and saw absolute certainty in his eyes. Why? You've more than paid whatever debt you thought you owed. You could walk away and no one would blame you. I'd blame me, Reese said. And more importantly, I don't want to walk away. I want to stay here with you and Luna and keep building this incredibly imperfect but genuinely good life we're creating. It is good, isn't it? I said, surprised by how much I meant it. It's the best thing I've ever been part of, Reese replied. I kissed him then, slow and certain, and when we broke apart I said the words I'd been holding back for weeks. I love you. Reese went very still. What? I love you, I repeated, more confident now. Not because you're convenient or helpful or good with Luna, though you're all those things, but because you showed up when you didn't have to. You stayed when it got hard, and you made me believe that maybe second chances are real. Thea, he said, and his voice was wrecked. I love you too. I've loved you since we were teenagers and I was too scared to do anything about it. I love you now in ways I didn't know were possible. We kissed again, deeper this time, and I felt something fundamental shift between us, from trying to make it work to actually working, from obligation to choice, from past guilt to present love. 2 months later, the 6-month review was scheduled for a Tuesday morning, and I woke up nervous despite Patricia's reassuring emails and Caroline's confidence that everything would be fine. Nay, what if the judge doesn't think 6 months is enough? I asked Reese while getting ready. What if they want another year or permanent evaluation or... Then we handle it, Reese interrupted gently, adjusting his tie in the mirror, together, like we've handled everything else. When did you become the calm one? I asked, trying to tame my hair into something professional. When I realized I'm not losing either of you, he said. Whatever the judge says today, we're a family. The court can document that or not, but it doesn't change what we are. Luna appeared in our doorway, our bedroom now, since Reese had officially moved in last month, wearing her favorite dress and a serious expression. Are we going to see the judge lady? She asked. Not you, baby, I said. Just me and Reese. You get to stay with Grandma and eat cookies. Will the mean lady be there? Luna asked, meaning Margaret. Probably, I admitted, kneeling down to her level. But she can't hurt us, okay? The judge just wants to make sure you're happy. I am happy, Luna said simply. Can I tell the judge that? If she asks, you can, I said, hugging her. But mostly you just get to be a kid and let the adults handle the boring stuff. We dropped Luna at my mother's house, where she immediately forgot about court dates in favor of helping bake cookies, and then Reese drove us to the courthouse with his hand resting on my knee. No matter what happens, I said as we parked, thank you for these 6 months, for being here, for becoming part of our lives. Best 6 months I've ever had, Reese said, bringing my hand to his lips, and hopefully, the first of many. The hearing was shorter than I expected. Judge Morrison reviewing Patricia's updated report, noting that Luna's preschool reported excellent adjustment, that our home environment remained stable, that multiple observations showed genuine family bonding. Mrs. Richardson, Judge Morrison said, do you have new evidence to present that contradicts these findings? Margaret's lawyer stood. Your Honor, we maintain that 6 months is insufficient time to determine long-term stability. 6 months is the time frame I ordered, the judge interrupted. And all evidence suggests that Luna is thriving. Miss Morrison, Mr. Donovan, the court finds that you've demonstrated the stability required. This case is closed unless substantial changes in circumstances warrant reopening. The gavel came down, and I felt tears of relief burn behind my eyes. We won. Actually, permanently won. Outside the courtroom, Margaret approached one final time. This isn't over, she said, but there was less venom in it now, more resignation. Yes, it is, I said, surprising myself with how calm I sounded. You can be Luna's grandmother or you can be her adversary, but you can't be both. If you want a relationship with her, it goes through me and Reese. Those are the terms. Margaret looked at Reese, and something complicated passed across her face. Your father destroyed a lot of families, she said. I suppose it's fitting his son puts one back together. She left before either of us could respond, and I turned to Reese. Did that just happen? I think she just gave us her weird blessing, Reese said, in the most Margaret way possible. What do we do now? I asked. Now, Reese said, pulling me close. We go pick up our daughter and tell her she's safe, and then we keep living this life we've built. Our life, I said. Our life, he agreed, and kissed me right there in the courthouse hallway, and I kissed him back, thinking about everything we'd survived to get here. His family's sins, my father's injustice, custody battles and 6-month reviews, and slowly learning to trust again. None of it had been easy, but standing there with Reese's arms around me and our future finally secure, I knew it had been worth it. Every difficult conversation, every moment of doubt, every choice to stay instead of run, all of it had led here, to this moment, to this man, to this life, and I wouldn't change a thing. Epilogue. 1 year later, I found Reese in Luna's room reading The Paper Bag Princess for what had to be the 100th time, her head resting against his shoulder while he did all the character voices she loved. Again, I asked from the doorway, smiling. She's very persuasive, Reese said, but he was grinning. 1 more chapter, Luna negotiated, already half asleep. Nice try, kid, I said, coming to kiss her forehead. School tomorrow. Sleep now. She grumbled but curled into her blankets, and Reese tucked her in with the practiced ease of someone who'd been doing this for over a year now. Love you, sweetheart, he said. Love you too, Daddy, Luna mumbled, and I watched Reese's expression do that thing it always did when she called him that, like she'd given him something precious he didn't deserve, but would protect with his life. We moved to the living room of our new house, bigger than the apartment, with a yard where Luna could play, and a kitchen that actually fit both of us, and I settled against him on the couch. Margaret called today, I said. Wants to take Luna to the zoo next weekend. How do you feel about that? Reese asked carefully, because Margaret's slow reintegration into Luna's life had been complicated. Okay, actually, I admitted. She's trying. It's awkward and she'll probably never like me, but she loves Luna. That's enough. You're very generous, Reese observed. I learned from someone who believes in second chances, I said, kissing his jaw. My phone buzzed with a reminder about my clinical rotation tomorrow. I'd started nursing school again 6 months ago, using the fund Valentina Moretti had actually established that had nothing to do with guilt and everything to do with Reese quietly ensuring I could finish what I'd started. How's studying going? He asked. Good, I said. Hard, but good. Worth it. You're going to be an incredible nurse, Reese said. I'm going to be an exhausted nurse, I corrected. But yeah, hopefully incredible too. We sat in comfortable silence, and I thought about how far we'd come, from that desperate night in the diner to this, to a home we'd built together, a daughter who was thriving, a love that had grown from complicated history into something real and lasting. Hey, I said, turning to look at him. Thank you. For what? Reese asked. For showing up, I said. For staying. For becoming the person Luna calls Daddy, and the person I can't imagine living without. Thank you for letting me, Reese replied, his hand cupping my face. For giving me a second chance to not be a coward. You were never a coward, I said. Just 17 and scared. There's a difference. Either way, he said, I'm glad I'm here now. Me too, I agreed, and kissed him properly, thinking about everything we'd survived and everything we were still building. It wasn't perfect, but it was ours, and that was more than enough.
Luna calls him Daddy. They have a house with a yard, Thea's in nursing school, Margaret is trying to be a real grandmother. And they're just living their earned happy ending, perfection in under 500 words. Now, the channel's favorite segment, the famous fun facts from our story. Thea's father was framed by the Donovan family as an FBI scapegoat. Reese was 17 and saw the real documents, but was too afraid to expose them. They had exactly 7 real conversations in high school, but Reese remembers all of them, including the time she helped him with history without him asking. Reese left home at 17 and built everything from scratch in Boston with his mother's family, refusing any dirty money from his father. The phrase, "I need a husband by tomorrow," was said at 10:15 p.m. on a Tuesday. Reese was eating lemon pie. He didn't hesitate, LOL. Luna called Reese Daddy for the first time 8 months after the wedding. He cried in the bathroom afterward. Patricia Chun's social worker wrote in her report, "I rarely see a genuine bond form this quickly. I recommend continuation." Margaret gave her passive-aggressive blessing by saying, "Your father destroyed families. You're rebuilding one," the closest thing to approval she could manage. Thea's father forgave the Donovan family before he died. He said anger was too exhausting to carry. Thea said, "I love you" first. In month 4, Reese had to sit down because his legs gave out. The ending takes place in a house with a yard, symbolizing that Luna has room to grow safely, unlike the cramped apartment at the beginning. My review. Why it works. A strong protagonist without being annoying, Thea is kind, accepts help, and processes anger in a mature way. Earned redemption. Reese was 17 and genuinely afraid. It wasn't pure malice. The emotional slow burn, 6 months of buildup, not everything forgiven in 2 days. A realistic child, Luna acts like a 4-year-old, not a plot device. A villain with motive, Margaret loves her granddaughter but is controlling and classist. What makes it different? Romance built through small daily actions, fixing a cabinet, making pancakes, reading the same story 100 times instead of grand gestures. Message: second chances exist, but they require work. Cowardice at 17 doesn't define you forever, but you have to prove change with consistency, not words. Score: 9/10. It would be a 10 if there were more scenes of Margaret trying to be a normal grandmother and failing miserably, because she's comedy gold. But I'll tell you one thing, the next story is going to be amazing. Until then, darling,